Before you call me a monster, know that I'm not here for forgiveness. I just need to tell someone what happened, because every time I look at my son, I see the wreckage of something I can never explain. My name's Maeve, I'm 46, and until a few months ago, my life was painfully ordinary. Married for over 20 years to Victor, one son, Leo, who just turned 22. We live in one of those neighborhoods where lawns match, and the biggest scandal is who forgot to take the bins out. Sundays were my favorite. I'd cook too much, Leo would come home from university, and lately he'd bring his girlfriend, Aria. Sweet girl, quiet but quick-witted, the kind who actually helps clear the table instead of scrolling her phone. She's studying nursing, always worried about everyone else before herself. I liked her immediately. Victor liked her too. He'd tease Leo about finally dating someone with a brain, and Aria would blush while I tried to shush him. There was nothing strange about it. Or at least, I thought there wasn't. Looking back, the signs were there. The way Victor sometimes lingered on her answers, the nervous way he'd ask what part of town she grew up in. But I brushed it off as small talk. I thought we were a happy, normal family, sharing dinner with the woman who might one day be my daughter-in-law. I thought I was helping plan my son's future. I didn't know I was staring at my husband's past. If you asked anyone, they'd say Victor and I were solid. We weren't some fairy tale couple. But we'd built a life that worked. A mortgage, matching retirement plans, quiet routines that felt like home. We had one bad patch about 10 years ago, a few months apart when he needed space. We don't talk about it now. We just patched the cracks and carried on like good, responsible adults do. Leo grew up in that kind of house. Steady, safe. He was the center of our world. Victor coached his basketball team, taught him how to change oil, made sure he knew the difference between a wrench and a ratchet before he hit high school. They were close in the way fathers and sons are when there's no reason not to be. Then came Aria. Leo met her in a university study group. I remember how nervous he was introducing her. She walked in with homemade cookies because she didn't want to come empty-handed. She said her mom taught her that. Her mom, Elena, raised her alone. Aria mentioned it casually. No bitterness, just fact. She never talked about her father. He wasn't around, she'd said once with a shrug that didn't match the flicker in her eyes. She was careful with money, worked part-time shifts at the campus clinic, sent half of her earnings to help her mom with bills. I admired her for that. Soon she was part of the furniture. She'd help me with dinner, write down my stew recipes in that tiny notebook of hers, hum softly while setting the table. She laughed at Victor's bad jokes, and he lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I thought it was pride, a father's happiness that his son had found someone so kind. For the first time in a long time, the house felt fuller, not just louder, but alive. It didn't feel like we were hosting Leo's girlfriend. It felt like we were quietly adding another member to the family. And for a while, that thought made me happier than I'd ever admit. It started with something so small I almost ignored it. Aria was at the kitchen table filling out some medical forms for her clinical rotation. She had her ID and a few bottles of over-the-counter meds spread out. One of the labels caught my eye. Elena Torres, written in neat pharmacy print under an old P.O. box address. I didn't think much of it at first, but the name, it tugged at something familiar. I've worked in admin for years, and names stick to me like lint. I told myself it was probably just déjà vu. That weekend, while decluttering the filing cabinet in our spare room, I found one of Victor's old tax folders, the kind I keep threatening to shred every spring. Inside were some faded bank statements from a separate account he'd kept during our brief separation years ago. I flipped through them absent-mindedly until a pattern stopped me cold. Every month for almost a year, there were cashier's checks made out to Elena Torres. The memo lines were vague but clear enough. Support. Support for what? My first thought was business. Victor sometimes helped old clients or family friends, but the dates didn't match anything from work. They overlapped with the year our marriage nearly fell apart. The logical part of my brain whispered that it was a coincidence. Maybe a loan, a charity thing. But the part of me that's lived 20 years beside a man who keeps his feelings under lock and key started to hum with dread. I sat there staring at those checks, trying to remember where I'd heard that name before. And then it hit me. Aria's mother, Elena Torres. And suddenly, that tug in my stomach turned into something darker, a knot that refused to loosen. Once you start looking for something, you find it everywhere. A few nights after finding those checks, I couldn't sleep. Victor was snoring softly beside me, and every breath he took sounded like a lie I hadn't caught yet. I got up, poured a glass of water, and found myself wandering into the garage, his domain. There's an old red toolbox he keeps under the workbench, stuffed with random junk. Screws, spare keys, birthday cards we never sent. I don't even know what I was looking for. Proof, maybe. Something to tell me I wasn't imagining it. At the bottom, I found an envelope. Yellowed, sealed, but never mailed. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. E. No address, just that single initial. Inside was a card, a cheap one, the kind you grab at a gas station. The message inside was short, written in the same hand I'd watched sign birthday cards for decades. She deserves better than my silence. No date, no explanation. But I didn't need one. I waited until morning to confront him. I didn't want to believe I'd become the kind of wife who snoops through her husband's things, but I couldn't unsee it. He froze when I said her name. Elena Torres. He sat down, rubbing his temples like the weight of it had been waiting years to fall. Yes, he said finally. During that time we were separated, I saw someone. It didn't last. She told me she was pregnant later, but said it wasn't mine. I believed her. I stared at him, voice shaking. Did you ever check? He shook his head. No, but I sent a little help for a while, just in case. Then she stopped responding. I whispered the words I already knew were true. Aria's mother is Elena Torres. Victor didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. After that night, I couldn't look at either of them the same. Every time Aria smiled, I saw Victor's dimple, the same one that deepened when he tried not to laugh, the tilt of her head when she listened, the way she chewed the inside of her cheek when she was nervous. They weren't coincidences anymore. I wanted to believe I was seeing ghosts, that my mind was creating patterns out of fear. But once you suspect something like that, there's no going back to ignorance. A few days later, I bought one of those ancestry kits online. I told myself it was harmless. Family fun, I said casually at dinner. A little project before the holidays. You know, see where we all come from. Aria's eyes lit up. I've always wanted to do one. My mom never talks about her side much. Leo grinned. Sure, why not? Maybe I'm secretly royalty. Victor just looked at me. Long, quiet, unreadable. It's pointless vanity, he said finally. I smiled back. Maybe, but humor me. He didn't argue further, but the next few weeks felt like living in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. I was rehearsing normalcy, cooking dinners, asking about classes, pretending my hands didn't shake every time Aria called me Mrs. Weller. The night we mailed the kits, Aria hugged me, laughing. This is going to be so interesting. Maybe we're distant cousins or something. The joke landed like a stone in my throat. After that, the waiting began. You'd think life would go on, but it doesn't. It freezes. You move through it like a sleepwalker, folding laundry, paying bills, making conversation, while every thought circles back to a single point. What if? At night, I'd lie awake next to Victor, staring at the ceiling, counting the breaths between us. Sometimes I wanted to wake him and scream, "What did you do to us?" Other nights, I wanted to believe him, that it had been a mistake, a coincidence, something smaller than it felt. But in the quiet, I already knew. The truth was coming, proof or poison, and all I could do was wait for it to choose which one it would be. The email came on a Saturday morning. I was chopping vegetables when I heard the ping from my phone. The Ancestry site's cheerful notification. Your results are ready. For a second, I froze. The smell of onions hung heavy in the air, sharp and wet, just like the way my stomach suddenly felt. Victor was at the table reading the paper. Leo had gone out to run errands. Aria was upstairs, napping after a long night shift at the clinic. It was an ordinary morning, right until it wasn't. I opened the email. It started like any other, ethnicity breakdowns, color-coded maps, but then I saw the section labeled Close Family Matches. At the very top of the list, in bold letters, Victor Weller, 50% shared DNA, parent-child relationship confirmed. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I just stared at it, waiting for the screen to morph into something else. Anything else? Then my knees went weak. I stumbled toward the sink and threw up until I was dry heaving. The sound must have startled Victor because he was beside me suddenly, asking what was wrong. I handed him the phone with shaking hands. He looked down at the screen. For a long time, he said nothing. Then his shoulders dropped. He sank into the chair like the air had been sucked out of him. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Maeve, I swear to God I didn't know." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the room felt too small, the air too thick, the world too cruel to let truth exist inside it. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the front door open, Leo's voice calling out for lunch. And that's when the words slipped out of me, raw and strangled, echoing through the kitchen like a curse. "My son has been sleeping with his sister." Victor flinched like I'd struck him, but I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was staring at the staircase and the sound of Arya's footsteps coming down. I didn't wait for Victor to do anything. He just sat there, head in his hands, muttering the same useless words. I didn't know. Arya was still asleep upstairs. My hands were shaking as I climbed the steps. I opened her door softly and sat on the edge of the bed. "Arya," I said, my voice barely holding. "Sweetheart, I need you to come downstairs for a minute." She blinked, confused, still half dreaming. On the porch, the sun was too bright, the air heavy. I told her the truth as gently as I could, every syllable feeling like a shard of glass on my tongue. When I said Victor's name, she froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then she whispered, "I didn't know." Over and over again, like it could change something. Then Leo's car pulled up. He saw Arya crying, and instinctively he moved to wrap his arms around her. "Don't," I said, stepping between them. He looked at me, confused. Then at Victor, who was standing in the doorway, pale and hollow. "What's going on?" No one answered. Then it all hit at once. Leo's disbelief, Victor's apologies, Arya's sobs. Leo punched the wall so hard the plaster cracked. I pulled him back, yelling the only thing that mattered now. "No more touching! No more touching!" It was late that night when Arya knocked on my bedroom door. Her eyes were swollen, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we talk? Just us?" We sat at the edge of the bed, the house silent except for the occasional creak of Leo pacing downstairs. Arya took out her phone, scrolling with trembling fingers before handing it to me. A message thread with Victor. "Weeks old. Victor, if your mother's name is Elena, please, let me handle this. Don't tell Maeve yet." I stared at it until the words blurred. Arya's voice cracked. "I found an old letter among my mom's things. It had your husband's name on it." I didn't know what it meant, so I reached out to him. He told me it was probably a mix-up and that he'd look into it privately. He said he didn't want to worry anyone until he was sure. My stomach turned. He'd known. Not everything. Maybe not the full truth, but enough to suspect. Enough to stop it before it went this far. And he chose silence. I realized then that this wasn't some cruel twist of fate or cosmic accident. It was cowardice. The incest wasn't intentional, but the risk, the silence, that was deliberate. And somehow that betrayal felt worse than the bloodline. The next morning felt like living inside a fire that had already burned everything down. There was nothing left to save, just ashes to sweep. I separated bedrooms first, because it was something to do. Arya stayed in the guest room until I could reach her aunt, who lived 2 towns over. Leo packed a bag that same afternoon, muttering that he needed space to think. I found the number for an emergency trauma counselor and booked sessions for all 3 of them. Whether they showed up or not was their choice. Then I turned to Victor. "Leave," I said. He didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded, collected a duffel bag, and walked out the door. For once, silence was the only mercy left. 3 months later, I filed for legal separation. The papers felt heavier than I expected. Not grief, not anger, just finality. I still cook dinner at 6 out of habit, but the kitchen stays quiet now. 1 plate, 1 chair, no laughter bleeding through the walls. I don't hate Arya. She calls sometimes, mostly to apologize, and I tell her to stop. None of this was her fault. I just keep a boundary, send her therapy contacts, and wish her peace. Leo's healing in his own way. I remind him every time we talk. He did nothing knowingly wrong. I can forgive an accident. I can't forgive a cover-up. Blood didn't just tell us where we came from, it told us where we could never go. I'm not asking for judgment or mercy, just space to rebuild a family from the shards of a secret.